Hello! It is Friday of the last week in Easter. It's 2 days to Pentecost. And our reading today is the 8th chapter of the book of Hebrews. Now, at the beginning of this, we're reminded again of ways in which Jesus, as the new high priest, is better than the old system. How Jesus in the heavenly tabernacle, the heavenly temple, is in a better position than the high priest was in the earthly tabernacle and the earthly temple, which is about, as we see at the very end of the chapter, about to pass away. Now, the second part of the chapter is actually quoted from the book of Jeremiah. And the author of the book of Hebrews uses this Old Testament prophet to show these Hebrew Christians to whom he's writing that those things Jeremiah said about the new covenant actually have to do with the church now. That God will write his law on our hearts. In other words, that our consciences will be God's moral code. And it's not something that we will have to memorize, but in fact, it will be God written on our hearts. And also that, we won't have to have everyone tell his neighbor to know the Lord, because they will know the Lord. This kind of reminds me also of the last part of the book of Isaiah, and how we see the glory of God and the knowledge of God spread throughout the earth, where we see the knowledge of the glory of God covering the earth as the waters cover the sea, which we see in several Old Testament prophets. But that's something that's new about this covenant, that it's not limited to Israel, because they couldn't spread the covenant and the good news of God's love the way they should, but it had to come through Jesus to spread to every tribe, tongue, and nation. And then we also see that God will forgive our iniquities and remember them no more. Now, how often do we want to remember iniquities? We have a much more difficult time forgetting. We have a much more difficult time forgiving. Sometimes we even have trouble forgiving people who have nothing to do with us, especially if they're Christian celebrities. We think that they owe us some sort of obligation and that we have to forgive them for things they've done. But, God forgives all of our iniquities, and God remembers them no more. We just need to be more like God in the way that we forgive. And again, at the end of this passage, he says, this is all because that old system has become obsolete. The old covenant has become obsolete. In fact, that's such an easy way to translate that word that you can go to lots of different translations and it's always obsolete. That's what's become of the old covenant. It's about to fade away. It's about to pass away for the Hebrew Christians that he's writing to then. In fact, it does get completely wiped away just very shortly after this book is written in 70 AD. So I want to encourage you today to look at those things that God has promised about the new covenant out of Jeremiah, used by the author of Hebrews, about how he's going to change us, about how he's going to change the world around us, and about the attitudes that we need to have of forgiveness because of the great forgiveness that he has toward us. I encourage you with that today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.